Hi all, welcome. Today I have a story for you that is about a woman that was brutal, cunning, vicious, and vengeful almost beyond belief. Some of you might know this woman or have heard this woman be referred to in your churches as Saint Olga of Kiev. Now, Saint Olga's story is almost something right out of a book of mythical legends and fairy tales, one of those that hasn't been whitewashed over. This is like the Cinderella sisters cut off their parts of their feet to fit in the shoe kind of gruesome fairy tale. So, what was Princess Olga's story? And more importantly, why and how did she become a saint, recognized in both the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic faiths as equal to the apostles? So Olga's story didn't really start, and we don't see her come up in history until after she married Prince Igor, the ruler of Kiev, which is an area that would eventually become Ukraine and Russia and that type of area. Anyway, back to topic. So, Olga leaps into history when she marries Prince Igor of Kiev. She becomes the queen, and it's all settled pretty well. She kind of settles into her role, and we don't hear much from her. Now, when it starts getting weird, and her story becomes, shall we say, elevated, is when these guys that kind of are known, that were known as I have a hard time pronouncing this one, but Drivlians, end up killing Igor. So, how'd that happen? Well, gets into some political kind of stuff. The Drivlians and the Kievan Rus Empire had kind of paired up against the Byzantine Empire, except the Drivlians were paying Igor for this partnership. So Igor and the Kievans were kind of on the defending side of it, and they were kind of defending the Drivlians, which were a lower, smaller ruling nation. So, all's well. The Drivlians are paying tribute to Igor's predecessor. Now that's important, because they are paying tribute technically to his predecessor for this protection. So, when the predecessor dies, the Drivlians stop paying Igor. Igor is not happy with that. He doesn't like not being paid just because his predecessor died, and he wants his money. So, like any ruling king would do, he went basically on his own to the Drivlian Empire's capital and demanded his money. Now, the Drivlians were just like, no, we aren't giving you money. We already paid it to this warlord guy, and he's protecting us. So Igor demanded the money. He had really no backup, and the Drivlians were just not happy with it, and they weren't gonna have it. So They killed him. They killed him in a way that is... You know what? I'm just going to read you the description because... And I wouldn't accept, I feel like it's important for Olga's mindset later on. When she finds out about this, she's understandably pretty upset. Here's a quote from the Byzantine chronicler Leo the Deacon. Okay? Quote, "They had bent down 2 birch trees to the prince's feet." This is Prince Igor, Olga's husband, and the ruler of Kiev. Okay? So, they had bent down 2 birch trees to the prince's feet and tied them to his legs. Then, they let the trees straighten again, thus tearing the prince's body apart. Now, I have spent my fair share of time, probably more than my fair share of time, imagining and studying and learning about medieval murder and torture, and that's a little out there even for me. Right, so Olga, understandably, when she hears this, is furious. She is so freaking pissed off, and I'm assuming pretty sad and depressed too. This was her husband, the father of her 3-year-old son. Now suddenly she finds out that he has been literally ripped in half, and she is now regent ruler for her 3-year-old son, who obviously is too young to rule. Well, this is where Olga's mind, cunning, intelligence, and a perverse sense of imagination really comes to light. So Princess Olga is now in charge of this country, this nation of Kiev. And the Drivlians, having just murdered her husband in an exceedingly brutal fashion, saw this as an opportunity to expand their territory and take over Kiev. Now, they saw Olga as a noble woman who had just essentially ascended to the throne and was completely out of her element and could be easily persuaded into marrying their Prince Mal. So they sent 20 men to persuade Princess Olga to marry their prince. When the men arrived on Princess Olga's shore, she requested that they stay in the ship for 1 night while she prepared for their meeting in the morning. They complied. They wanted to, naturally, they wanted to get her to agree peacefully and to persuade her. So they were being nice and complied, and this is your land, yes, we'll do what you request. What's 1 more night on the ship? Unbeknownst to them, Olga then had her servants go out in the middle of the night, all night, and dig a huge pit. The next morning, she invited them off the ship, and her servants and her army were there to greet them as she had them all buried alive. Instead of just sending back that clear no, I just buried your 20 men, I will not marry you. No. She sent back word that she would marry him, but there was a stipulation. They must send a welcoming party of all their greatest men. They agreed. Which, they hadn't heard back at all from their 20 men, but maybe they just didn't expect to, I don't know. Anyway, so they quickly sent the party, because that's what Olga had wanted, and they wanted Olga. And Olga was ready for them when they came. Again, putting on her what I imagine to be a very sweet, innocent persona, she welcomed them into her land and actually offered for these men to wash up in her own private bathhouse. While these greatest of the great Derivlian men were washing up and bathing in her bathhouse, she had the place locked, set on fire, and she watched it burn to the ground. But she wasn't done. No. Olga had more vengeance to take and had bigger plans. Much, much bigger. But after not hearing back from 2 parties of people that they sent out, when she responded to them again and asked for a welcome into their city, into their capital city, and a funeral feast for her late husband, they agreed. I have no idea where they thought that the welcoming party may have gone, or the other 20 men, or what, but for some reason they didn't seem to be fazed at all by their absence. And they welcomed Olga and her armies and her servants into their capital city with a feast for a king. The funeral feast was attended by 5,000 of Derivlian royalty, nobility, and soldiers. While they were all enjoying the feast, Olga had other plans. She appeared to be kind and cooperative, and even to be enjoying the feast as well, which she probably was, because she knew that every single one of those men that had wronged her by killing her husband was about to die. After finishing the feast, and after having gotten the Derivlian people drunk on food and wine, Olga's soldiers ran each 5,000 people through with their swords. Utter chaos ensued. People were running and screaming in the streets, I'm assuming because it's mentioned that they then began to beg Olga and tell her that they would continue to pay the tribute that her late husband had been asking for if only she would stop the massacre. Olga sweetly complied, but insisted that she did not need tribute. Instead, she only wanted birds from each of the homes. That night, Olga set the entire city on fire. The entire capital city was in flames, burning to the ground. Those that tried to escape were either murdered by the soldiers or were taken as slaves. The Derivlians that lived in the city that did escape death or slavery were then forced to pay tribute to the Kievan Empire. So that really saw to the end of Olga's reign of terror in that sense. She went on to rule for about 19 years without much incident, at least nothing near as notable as that. But then the real question, having heard that story, is how the hell did she become a saint? It essentially comes down to finding God, if you will. So Olga is best known in the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox religions as being the first ruler to bring Christianity to that area of the world. And that is, as far as I could tell, essentially the main reason that she is a saint. Vengeance and bloodshed aside. So the idea goes essentially that when she became Christian, when she went and became baptized into Christianity, then all of that could essentially have been forgiven, and her new life as a Christian began. So when she brought that back to her kingdom and her nation, she built churches, and she did her best to convert others from the pagan religions into the Christian faith. She didn't quite succeed in her lifetime because her son, who at that point was able to rule, she wasn't able to convert him, and he stayed with the pagan traditions. But it's speculated and generally assumed that Olga's influence on her grandson, who became the next ruler, brought him to Christianity, and then he was able to make Christianity a widespread thing in that eastern region. So that's essentially, as far as I could tell, why she is a saint. Whether bringing Christianity to a new region and trying to convert and converting yourself to Christianity is enough to outweigh all the death, bloodshed, and murder from her earlier life is, I suppose, up to you to decide based on your religious beliefs and beliefs in God. So that's the story of how the vengeful ruler of Kiev, Princess Olga, became the venerable, equal to the apostles, Saint Olga of the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. Okay, you guys, that's all I have on Saint Olga today. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. If you want to see more videos about fascinating historical people, places, and events, make sure to subscribe to my channel because I make new videos every week. You guys are all fantastic. Thank you again for watching, and remember, history is made every single day. I'll see you all next week.